Hey class, it's Mr. Wingren here. I wanted to do a quick lesson on the bank war and maybe, if I have time, the birth of the Whig Party. Right, so Andrew Jackson, he's going to win the election of 1832, and the number one thing that is discussed during his, I shouldn't say the number one thing, but a huge thing that happens, the number one thing is probably slavery. But a huge issue that comes up during his second term in office is um, banking. Why is banking such a huge issue? Because Jackson's going to veto the second bank of the United States, and that's going to cause all kinds of calamity. And it's going to have a real effect on the economy, and it's going to affect the economy for the next president after him, Van Buren. Right. So, why is banking such a huge issue? Mainly because America still doesn't have a paper money system. We still don't have American dollars. We don't have currency exactly. For the most part, we have promissory notes or banknotes. So essentially, what that means is that you would have a piece of paper issued by a bank that essentially said that it was worth um, a certain amount of gold or silver. So, meaning that the United States Treasury had X number of dollars worth of gold or silver, and you would have a promissory note that would basically say that your promissory note is worth that much gold or silver. Theoretically, you could walk into a bank with a $100 promissory note for gold or silver and turn it in, and they would theoretically give you $100 worth of specie or gold or silver. People didn't do that because it was much easier to just carry around a piece of paper that said it was worth $50 or $100 or $5 or whatever, or a coin even that was representative of gold or silver. But very few people actually carried around gold or silver; it was too dangerous. So they used promissory notes. As a result of having that kind of promissory note system, obviously banks and bankers had a ton of control over how the economy worked. They were the ones who ultimately determined the value of those kinds of things and of gold and silver. And it wasn't a scientific method like it is now. Well, I don't even know if it is now, but it wasn't as exact as it is now. It wasn't a standard, I should say. Um, and essentially, if a bank wanted to issue more paper money, it could. It would just write out a piece of paper and said, "Oh yeah, this is worth $100." Theoretically, a bank was only supposed to issue a certain percentage more than it actually had in storage, but obviously, banks would, issue a lot more, and the more that they issued, the more flow of money went out, and then it would cause deflation, and it would be worth the value of your money would go down and down and down. So and the more that they issued essentially meant that there was more debt. They would hand out promissory notes as a way to allow people to take a loan. So, for example, if you would go to go to a bank and take out a loan to purchase a farm, essentially they were theoretically giving you, let's say, $1,000 worth of gold written on a piece of paper. But if they didn't have $1,000 worth of gold written on $1,000 worth of gold, the paper was just paper. So the more of that they issued, the more debt that they created. Jackson hated that. He absolutely hated the concept of bankers issuing all kinds of debt and allowing common people to fall into debt. And so in 1832, Jackson decides to veto the re-up of the bank, and he gets rid of the bank. He could have allowed it to expire in 1836, but there was his fear, that the bank would be successful. He was afraid that if the bank was successful, then people wouldn't support his anti-bank policy. So he decides to sabotage the banking system by taking all of the money out of the national bank and distributing that money out to smaller state banks. Which we sometimes call pet banks. That's like a term for what Jackson did, his pet bank system. Again, he took the money out of the Federal Bank of America and then handed it out and gave it to smaller state banks. This sounds like a benevolent thing to do, but it essentially weakens it. I mean, if you think about the idea of, instead of having one large shield of money, he spread it out and made it very thin, making a whole bunch of very vulnerable banks rather than a one large bank. The other thing that it does, and Jackson's plan was he wanted to destroy the bank, but what he was hoping was that because he didn't have this one big bank that was issuing all kinds of loans, that the smaller banks would be more specific to who they loan to. But what ultimately happens is the smaller banks now actually issue even more loans than the one large bank because now more people have access to it. So it completely backfires on Jackson, and it creates an economy that he did not like. It ultimately created a much more what we call a speculative economy, meaning an economy that is based on debt and the future, based on the future, right? It's the same. Remember the Panic of 1819? We have the same exact thing happening, and there's going to be another panic. So there you go. So let's move on to the next one. As a result of this this system, what you have now is you have the Democratic Party is starting to break up. The Democratic Party breaks up into two main factions. One that believes in soft money, essentially what we're talking about, this banking system that gives out more loans, which is not Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was the opposite. He was a hard money Democrat. He believed in the idea that money should be based directly on gold and silver, not on speculation, not on promissory notes. So the Clay's American system kind of people are, of course, as you guessed, soft money Democrats, and the hard money Democrats are Jacksonites, people who didn't like the bank. But the hard and soft money Democrat people don't like the bank for different reasons. The Clay's American system kind of people, the soft money Democrats, they don't like the bank because they feel like the Bank of America is not issuing loans the way that they should be to the right people. And the hard money Democrats don't like the concept of a speculative economy. And there you go. The soft money Democrats also don't like the power that banks have on credit. That ultimately, the more loans that they give out, the less value there is in the credit. So, right. So that's going to divide the party up significantly. And it's going to lead to the creation of a couple main political parties, most notably the Whigs. But I wanted quickly to talk about the Locofocos. They are relatively insignificant in American history. The only thing that makes them significant is they have such a cool name. Locofocos were the name of a political party. It was a faction of hard money Democrats, specifically in New York. They were beyond Jackson. They hated Jackson, but they were hard money Democrats. They were made up primarily of union people, hardworking, laboring men. Some intellectuals and artisans, of course, around New York City, but for the most part, workers. And they hated the concept of paper money. They wanted to be paid in specie, in hard money. They were a secretive political party because they were anti-Jackson, and being anti-Jackson was actually kind of a dangerous thing to be in this time period. And so they would meet at night, and they would meet by candlelight. And so the name of their political party comes from, if you look down here in the bottom right-hand corner, of a brand new invention, matches, which a nickname for matches in those days, because they would light a match to light a candle, a nickname for matches was Locofocos. So the political party actually gets its name from matches. There you go. All right, but a more prominent and more important political party that's formed is, of course, the Whigs. And so I'm just going to jump ahead here to the Whigs. And I will actually do this in a separate lesson. So have a good day, and stay tuned for the Whigs lesson.